Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. And if you're new here, please subscribe because today we're talking about something incredibly serious that affects millions of people. But it's often misunderstood, stigmatized, and minimized: eating disorders. And I want to be really clear from the start. Eating disorders are not about vanity. Eating disorders are serious, complex mental illnesses with the highest mortality rate of any psychiatric condition. They affect people of all genders, ages, races, body sizes, and socioeconomic backgrounds. And they're rooted in a combination of genetic, psychological, social, and environmental factors that create a perfect storm of disordered thinking and behavior around food, eating, and body image. Today we're going to break down what eating disorders actually are, the different types, the psychological mechanisms that drive them, why they develop, the serious health consequences. Before we dive in, I need to include a content warning. We're going to be discussing eating disorders. If you're currently struggling with an eating disorder or in recovery, and this content might be triggering. And throughout this video, I'll include information about getting help, because if you or someone you know is struggling, professional support is crucial. Let's start with defining what eating disorders actually are, because there are several distinct conditions that fall under this umbrella. Eating disorders are characterized by persistent disturbances in eating behaviors, thoughts, and emotions that significantly impair physical health. Eating disorders are mental illnesses where food, eating, exercise, and body image become the focus of intense anxiety, obsessive thinking, and compulsive behaviors that the person uses to cope with emotional pain, exert control, manage difficult feelings, or address underlying psychological needs. The most commonly known eating disorder is anorexia nervosa, intense fear of gaining weight or becoming fat even when underweight. There are two subtypes: restricting type, where weight loss is achieved primarily through dieting, fasting, or excessive exercise, and binge eating, purging type, which involves episodes of binging or purging behaviors. People with anorexia often describe feeling like restricting food is the only thing they can control when everything else feels chaotic, or that the fear of weight gain is so overwhelming it overrides hunger, health concerns, and rational thinking. The disorder hijacks the brain's threat detection system, making weight gain feel as dangerous as a life-threatening emergency. Bulimia nervosa involves recurrent episodes of binge eating, consuming large amounts of food in a discrete period, while feeling loss of control followed by compensatory behaviors to prevent weight gain. The binge-purge cycle becomes a way to manage emotions, relieve stress, or cope with negative feelings, but it creates intense shame, physical damage. Binge eating disorder, which was only officially recognized as a distinct diagnosis in 2013, but is actually the most common eating disorder. People with BED experience loss of control during binges, eat rapidly, eat until uncomfortably full, eat large amounts when not physically hungry, eat alone due to embarrassment. This isn't occasional overeating, it's frequent, distressing. People with BED often struggle with weight stigma and shame, and the disorder is frequently dismissed or not taken seriously. It's a serious mental illness with biological and psychological roots. There's also avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, or RFID, which involves restricted eating that's not driven by body image concerns, but rather by sensory sensitivities, and it can lead to serious nutritional deficiencies and impaired growth. And then there's other specified feeding or eating disorder, or OSFED, which includes patterns that don't fit neatly into the above categories, but are still serious, like a typical anorexia where someone has all symptoms of anorexia but is an underweight, or purging disorder without binge eating or night eating syndrome. These disorders are just as valid and serious as the main categories. Now let's talk about what causes eating disorders, because this is complex and there's no single cause. Eating disorders develop from the interaction of multiple risk factors across different domains. Genetic factors play a significant role. If you have a family member with an eating disorder, your risk is much higher, suggesting inherited vulnerability. Specific genes related to serotonin regulation, reward processing, and impulse control have been implicated. Neurobiology matters, differences in brain structure and function, particularly in areas involved in reward, emotional regulation, and self-control, are found in people with eating disorders. Psychological factors include perfectionism, anxiety disorders, obsessive-compulsive traits, low self-esteem, emotional dysregulation, trauma history, and difficulty expressing or managing emotions. Eating disorders often develop as a way to cope with overwhelming feelings, create a sense of control, self-punish, or numb emotional pain. Sociocultural factors are huge. We live in a culture that idealizes thinness, demonizes certain foods, promotes diet culture, creates moral judgments around eating, and constantly bombards us with messages that our bodies need to be fixed. Weight stigma and discrimination, particularly anti-fat bias, create enormous psychological pressure. Social media intensifies this with filtered images, comparison culture, and pro-eating disorder communities that glorify disordered behaviors. Trauma, particularly sexual abuse, physical abuse, or other adverse childhood experiences, significantly increases eating disorder risk. And life transitions, major stress, or loss can trigger eating disorder development in vulnerable individuals. It's important to understand that eating disorders are not caused by parents, by wanting attention, or by exposure to media images alone. They are multifactorial illnesses where biological vulnerability meets psychological factors and environmental triggers. Let's discuss the psychological functions that eating disorders serve, because understanding this helps explain why they're so difficult to overcome. For many people, the eating disorder provides something, a sense of control when life feels chaotic, a way to manage anxiety or depression, a method of self-punishment if you feel you deserve suffering, a distraction from emotional pain, an identity when you feel lost, a way to disappear or take up less space if you feel you're too much, or paradoxically, a way to be seen and have needs recognized when you've been invisible. The eating disorder becomes intertwined with the person's sense of self and their coping mechanisms, which is why just eat or just stop isn't remotely helpful. The disorder is serving deep psychological needs that have to be addressed for recovery to be possible. There's also the phenomena where the eating disorder creates physiological changes that maintain the disorder. Starvation affects brain function, making thinking more rigid, intensifying anxiety, increasing obsessive thoughts, and impairing judgment, so the disorder literally changes your brain in ways that make it harder to recover. Binge purge cycles disrupt hunger and fullness cues, alter metabolism, and create physical dependence on the behavior. The disorder creates a self-perpetuating cycle where the behaviors cause changes that reinforce the behaviors. Now let's talk about the serious health consequences, because eating disorders are deadly. Anorexia has the highest mortality rate of any psychiatric disorder. Studies suggest 5 to 20% of people with chronic anorexia will die from the illness, from cardiac complications, organ failure, suicide, or other medical complications. All eating disorders can cause severe medical problems, heart issues including irregular heartbeat, low blood pressure, heart failure, bone density loss leading to osteoporosis and fractures, kidney problems and kidney failure, electrolyte imbalances that can cause seizures or sudden death, gastrointestinal complications, hormonal disruptions, tooth decay and esophageal damage from purging, hair loss, fatigue and weakness, cognitive impairment, infertility, and increased suicide risk. These are unscare tactics. They real medical consequences that make eating disorders genuinely life-threatening conditions, requiring medical monitoring during treatment. Let's discuss treatment, because recovery is absolutely possible, but it requires comprehensive, specialized care. Effective treatment typically involves a multidisciplinary team, including therapists specializing in eating disorders, dietitians, medical doctors, and sometimes psychiatrists. The therapeutic approaches that have the most evidence include cognitive behavioral therapy, which helps identify and change distorted thoughts and behaviors; dialectical behavior therapy, which teaches emotion regulation and distress tolerance skills; family-based treatment, particularly for adolescents, which involves the family in supporting recovery; and acceptance and commitment therapy. Nutritional rehabilitation is crucial, working with a dietitian to restore healthy eating patterns, normalize relationship with food, and address nutritional deficiencies. Medical monitoring ensures physical safety during recovery. In severe cases, higher levels of care like residential treatment, partial hospitalization, or intensive outpatient programs may be necessary. Medication, particularly antidepressants, can help manage co-occurring anxiety or depression. Recovery is not linear. It involves setbacks, challenges, and takes time, often years. But full recovery is possible, and even when full recovery isn't achieved, substantial improvement in quality of life absolutely is. One crucial thing to understand: you cannot tell if someone has an eating disorder by looking at them. People in larger bodies can have anorexia. People in smaller bodies can have binge eating disorder. Normal weight individuals can be severely ill with bulimia. The stereotype of eating disorders only affecting underweight individuals prevents many people from getting help and allows providers to miss diagnoses. Eating disorders are mental illnesses that manifest in behaviors and thoughts, and body size is not a reliable indicator of presence or severity. Let's talk about what to do if you're concerned about someone. Don't comment on their body weight. Or eating this almost always makes things worse. Express concern about behaviors you've noticed and specific ways their well-being seems affected. Listen without judgment if they open up. Avoid simplistic solutions like telling them to just eat normally. Help them access professional resources. Understand that they may not be ready to accept help, and you can't force recovery, but you can maintain connection and keep offering support. If you're struggling yourself, please know that seeking help is strength, not weakness. Eating disorders thrive in secrecy and shame, and breaking the silence is often the first step. Recovery is hard, but staying sick is harder. And you deserve to live a life not controlled by food, weight, and body image. There are resources available: the National Eating Disorders Association Helpline, eating disorder treatment locators, support groups, and specialized treatment centers. You don't have to do this alone. If this video resonated with you, please share it, because eating disorders are often suffered in silence and people need to know they're not alone. If you feel comfortable, drop a comment about your experience, whether you're struggling in recovery or supporting someone. And please, if you're in crisis, reach out to a professional immediately. You matter, your life matters, and recovery is worth fighting for. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.